Welcome to week 1 of our midweek studies for our Go, Gather, Grow spiritual growth campaign. The idea behind our spiritual growth campaigns is that we have midweek studies where we get together in small groups. We have weekend messages, and we also have daily devotions to really get home the message that we're trying to communicate, which in this case really stems from Vision Sunday, where we said, yes, we want to stand firm in 2022, but we also want to solidify some things as a church and as it relates to Go, Gather, Grow. With Go, it was easy gospel explanations. I told the story on Vision Sunday where I was asked, having moved to Tamworth and people understanding that we'd moved to help out with a church, asked, well, what do you guys actually believe, Bron? And I gave this answer that just, like, I didn't even know what I was saying, let alone for them to understand. It gave them no information whatsoever. And so we said, let's ensure that people at the Chapel Collective know how to give at least a gospel explanation. So on Sunday, we had Tony McLennan come, and if your group wasn't in church for whatever reason on Sunday, you might like to watch him and the presentation that he brings. And it's really a way of showing people the simple good news of Jesus Christ, the simple gospel. So today, what I would love to do is to give you a few more tools. After each one, they're all visual. I'd love you to pause and discuss them, say why you think that you would be able to communicate that, or maybe why you think that that wouldn't work for you, and maybe even have a practice. Someone, volunteer them right now, having a go at giving that gospel explanation. And Tony McLennan showed us how to do it on our phone. But these are just, if you've got a piece of paper, if you've got a serviette handy and a pen, you can explain the gospel. So let's go to the first one, and it's called 3 Circles Evangelism. So the idea would be that someone says, so what do you believe? Or maybe you've struck up a conversation and it's turned to spiritual matters or eternal things, and you've had an opportunity presented to you where you can explain what you believe. So this is a way that you could do that. You could say to them, and I'm just going to say it like you're my friend, and we're there at the cafe together, and so, hello, Shaniqua. Whatever your name is, I'm going to show you how I would explain this to you. Shaniqua, would you agree with me that our world is pretty broken? It just seems like our world has lots and lots of brokenness in it, right? We see it all around us. And I would assume that most people would say yes to that. What we do is we try to get out of our brokenness through, maybe through, lots of people try drugs, lots of people try to numb it with alcohol. Lots of people really try to make their life awesome through getting a great job and saving and having a nest egg and all that kind of stuff, and having that security that they feel. Lots of people try relationships in order to escape their brokenness. But the fact is that as much as we try to get away from our brokenness, it's almost like these are just bungee cords, and they propel us back into that brokenness. Do you identify with that? Have you ever felt that kind of lostness or that brokenness? Well, you know what? That wasn't God's design for us. That was not his original design. His perfect design was that we might dwell with him in love, and that it would just be amazing, that it would be complete and whole, us knowing God, God knowing us, living together. What happened is that we turned away from God's perfect design and into brokenness. This is called sin. It's not a word that particularly gets used that much, but it simply means that we go our own way. We go away from God's perfect design and we go our own way, which leads to brokenness. Would you say that you've always gone God's way? Well, I certainly haven't. Well, what happened was that Jesus came to earth, and he came down and he died on the cross and rose again. Jesus did that because he wanted to take all the brokenness on himself, and essentially he broke himself on the cross. He came down and he took all the brokenness. Then he rose again. That's the good news about Jesus Christ. That's what Christians believe. And simply all we need to do is to turn away and believe and put our trust in Jesus, and turn from our brokenness, put our trust in Jesus, and we will be restored to the perfect design that God had for us all along. So let me ask you, which circle do you see yourself in? Do you feel like you're in God's perfect design and got a great relationship with Him, having trusted and believed in what He's done? Or do you see yourself in that brokenness? Where do you want to see yourself? And if they say, I want to be in God's original design, then you say, well, simply, it just means turning and believing. And maybe that might be a good time to share your own story, or to say, would you like me to pray with you right now? And that begins a whole journey for them. So that's the first one, 3 circles of evangelism. How did you go with that one? Did someone give it a crack? I hope that you were able to understand that, or even explain why you wouldn't understand that and what would make you uncomfortable, just to unpack that a little bit. The next one's called the morality ladder. The morality ladder. That sounds like a tongue twister. But let me show you how you would explain this one. Again, maybe you've got a serviette on the cafe table, maybe you've got a piece of paper that you've grabbed, and you can say, hey, let me explain something to you. Let me unpack something for you. Here's a ladder. Look at my brilliant artistic styling. You've never seen a ladder like that before. Now you'd say, let's say that God is absolutely perfect, okay? God is the perfect standard. He's the creator of everything. Let's assume that He's good. He's above everything else, right? Sure. And, someone like Hitler, well, we're going to put him right down the bottom, right? Someone who commits genocide. Oh, we want to spell his name properly. Someone who has that kind of abhorrent history. Well, then we're putting them right down the bottom. We're putting maybe a serial killer just above him simply because they didn't kill quite as many people as Hitler facilitated the killing of. So, okay, like God's up there, Hitler's down there. What about someone like Mother Teresa, who did so much good in the community and in the slums of Calcutta? Well, surely she's got to be somewhere up here, right? But, she would say that she was nowhere near as good as God. So let's put her here, Mother Teresa. And then, well, I'm not Hitler, but I'm definitely not Mother Teresa here. So let's put Bron somewhere here. Like, I want to put myself a bit further away from there, but I haven't put enough rungs on the ladder, but I'm definitely not as good as Mother Teresa, so I'll put myself there. Now, where would you put yourself? Now, I've got Alex here, who's filming today. I'll say, Alex, where would you put yourself? And usually someone will say, well, they'll look at you and they'll try to be nice, or they might not, and they'll put themselves somewhere, either just above or just below you. So let's imagine that Alex says, Brian, put me down there. And so the next question that we would ask is, okay, there's a gap, obviously, between you and God. Here is the gap between you and God. What is your plan for filling that gap? And, Alex might say, well, Brian, I'm determined to do a lot more good things than the bad things that I've done. I know I'm going to try and work my way up the ladder. And then that's when we would say, you know what, Mother Teresa knew that there was no way, even with all the good that she could do, that she was ever going to work her way up to the God standard. There was no way to get to that standard. And so her whole plan for filling this gap between herself and God was by trusting in Jesus. And that is the only way that we fill the gap between us and God, is trusting in what Jesus has already done. So we would try to do and do and do in order to climb those rungs, but in fact, we just have to trust in what Jesus has already done by coming to earth, by paying the price for our sin, by dying on the cross and rising again. Do you want to trust in Jesus to fill the gap between you and God? How about you pause the video, have a discussion around how you would explain that better, what questions you think might come up, and someone have a crack at actually explaining it to the group. So now to the last one. This is how you could explain what Jesus did. You would say, I want you to imagine that this is your life. This is your life. And actually there's a book involved as well, so it would fit. But this is your life. And the idea was always that you would have just free connection with God. Imagine that the atmosphere is God. But what happened was that our sin separated us from God. And so our sin is simply where we've decided to go our own way. It's where we've known what to do, what the right thing was to do, and not done it. It's when we've known what the wrong thing to do is and we've done it. So I want you to imagine that every sin that you've ever committed, past, current, and any sin that you ever will commit is contained on the pages of this book. You might be like, Bron, you're going to need a whole lot bigger book to think about my life. But just bear with me. That this contains every sin that you've ever committed in the past, currently, and any sin that you'll ever commit into the future. And then that is the separation between you and God. So the thing is that God wants a relationship with you, but he has to deal with this. To just bypass this and overlook this would be to go against his character. He can't just overlook sin and wrongdoing and just decide to have a relationship with someone anyway. Even in our own life, we feel like that's hypocritical when people do that. So he wants to forgive us and he wants to have relationship with us, but something needs to be done about this. So that's where Jesus comes in. And Jesus did not sin. He had nothing between him and God. There was no page, not even a single line that could be leveled against him. And so by coming and dying on the cross, the whole purpose of that was the physical representation of what he did, which was to take all of our brokenness, all of our sin onto himself and leave us to have a free relationship with God. God dealt with our sin by putting it on Jesus and was able to forgive us and have relationship with us. So now we are clear and Jesus has now risen again and dealt with the sin and the price is paid. And we're able to be in Jesus having a relationship with God. And it's simply a matter of saying, Jesus, will you take my sin? You've already paid for it. Now I put my trust in you and I give it all to you. Okay, have a pause. Have a discussion, have a think about that, look at the study guide and the questions in the study guide, and maybe have a talk about the ways that people have presented the gospel to you at various times, or the way that you've presented it that you feel like has just made sense and really worked. Easy gospel explanations. That's week 1.